Welcome to BIA, Canada's top black media provider. Whether you're looking for shows on fashion, art, music, or simple lifestyle, we bring you the best content the black community in Canada has to offer and so much more. And better yet, do you have an idea for a project you'd like us to help you with? We provide equipment, studio, and office space, as well as a team of dedicated individuals to help you bring those ideas to life. So don't wait. Check out our new website at biamedia.ca for more information on how to contact us and start creating today. BIA Media, your way.
Hello, and welcome to Getting Real with Paula. My name is Paula Alphonse, and tonight we are exploring the topic of implicit bias with Junie Saint-Fleur. These unconscious bias are, in fact, a universal phenomenon found in all societies and all cultures. More specifically, what I am referring to are these preconceived notions, also called stereotypes, that we hold around gender, culture, ability, language, age, economic status, and so much more. The challenge for many of us is that we are often totally unaware of these biases or of the impact that they have on our daily lives. With that in mind, let's welcome our guest, Junie Saint-Fleur. Good evening, Junie.
Good evening, Paula.
And
It's such a
thank you
pleasure to be here.
Thank you for agreeing to come back for what I call take two of this conversation. For those who don't know, we had that conversation a few weeks ago, a few months ago in French, and now we're having it in English because we thought it was too important to just not reach everybody else. So, just letting you know at the same time, for some of us, there are certain things you're going to discover during this session that might make you a little uncomfortable. But what we're looking towards is to raise awareness, because once we know what it is that we're doing, then we can work on those.
Yeah.
So, Junie, I'm going to start. I'm all excited. I'm going to start by asking, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself using 5 words that
For
describe
sure.
yourself and tell us why you chose those words.
So that was like a tricky question. You didn't ask me that when we were doing the French one, and I had to work on like reducing myself into 5 words.
It's okay. We know 5 words will never completely cover an existence, but those
So
are the
true.
words that should, to you, describe you the best. The
Yeah.
first things people would have in mind.
Yes. Family, spirituality, community, mediator, and empathy. These are like my 5 words. And like I told you, I had to struggle in order to reduce it to that. Community, family, spirituality are very important for me because these are the words that keep me grounded
Yeah.
and also make me who I am. So when I look regarding my personality or the way I think or the way I go through life. It's based on things that I learned from my family, based on my spiritual faith, and definitely based on my community. Yeah. Mediator and empathy, definitely, I think, in terms of working, I'm working in communication, in talking with people. Most of my work is teamwork. So being able to put yourself into the other person's shoe is a way to avoid a lot of conflict. I think if more people were showing empathy, if more people were taking time to listen, like as a mediator, like one of the key things that you use is listening. So if more people were taking time to listen and put themselves in somebody else's shoes, definitely I think there's a lot of conflicts that could be avoided, that would have been avoid for that. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have a sense that we might come back to those words later, but yeah, we'll see, we'll see, we'll see. Could you give us a sense of what the broad lines of your career path have been, and what led you to develop that interest towards implicit bias?
Yeah, definitely. So my background in terms of education is sociology and law. And although I worked in the legal field for a few years after I graduate, I quickly shift because I was like, yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting. So I end up, one of the first internship I did was with the ICTR, the International Tribunal for the Genocide in Rwanda. And I really enjoyed my experience. And part of it was my interaction with people while I was in that country. I was in Arusha, so Tanzania, but based in the city of Arusha. So when I had to reflect and I was thinking of changing career path, I was like, oh, I enjoyed the legal work that I did there, but most of all, I enjoyed the interaction with people. So I was attracted to start working in international development. Traveling has always been something that I enjoy. Even in Canada, I lived in Ontario, in New Brunswick, in Saskatchewan, in Quebec City. So I'm seriously, I think my family, my mom is always questioning how come I love traveling so much. But this is something that I did. So after living in different countries, in different provinces in Quebec, I turned myself towards the international, and I worked in international development for more than 10 years. And every time I was traveling, so within Canada as well as outside of Canada, every time I was traveling, I think my perception, was changing. My perception of the world was changing. I was questioning my assumptions and questioning my vision of the world also, questioning the vision of the world that society was sending to me or my culture was sending to me. So this is connected to unconscious bias, things that you're taking for granted until you are challenging that information or until something happens in your life and makes you challenge that certainty that you have regarding some assumption or perceptions.
I have to say, because you've mentioned traveling in Canada, I used to travel a lot for work. And the one thing I remember the most about Nova Scotia, Halifax, was you would be standing on the sidewalk and the drivers would stop because they think you're going to cross. I'm in Ottawa. I'm trying to cross. I'm in the street. They're not stopping. So again, it's these things where you're like, oh, gee, it's another way of thinking. And for the first few times, I didn't catch it as quickly. And then after, I had to remember to be a little further away from the curb so that they would not stop. So it is interesting. Same country, but completely different way of being.
Same thing in New Brunswick. I won't tell you the number of times that I felt compelled to cross the street, although I didn't need to. I didn't need to cross the street, but
It's like now
the
that
car
I've made
is
everybody
stopping.
stop, I might as well
Exactly.
cross.
I need to cross.
Because they're like, what's wrong with your woman?
But yes,
So
you're so right. Mhm.
for those people in the audience that are not familiar with the term implicit bias, how would you define it, and why should it be something we pay attention to?
Yeah. So there's always a little distinction between unconscious bias and implicit bias. And I'm not going to dive into this because it's a little bit more complicated. So I'll just use the term unconscious bias
Okay.
to have it like the kind of the same understanding, but there's a slight difference between the two. But an unconscious bias, it's a presumption that comes to someone's mind without them not acknowledging it. It's without their knowledge, it's without their control, and it's assumption that or presumption that they take for granted. We take them to be true, and based on that assumption that it's true, we often act on them. So the unconscious bias itself, if it was just staying in your mind, we wouldn't have a problem with it. I think the last time I mentioned, if I see somebody that has a dress and I don't like the dress, just thinking that I don't like the dress, okay, I might say, Junie, this is not nice, but it doesn't have an effect on somebody as long as it didn't cross my mouth saying that I don't like your dress. But the problem is because we are taking these things for true, we act on it. And because we are acting on it, we do actions and attitudes that are discriminatory towards some people based on these assumptions that we are taking for true. So even if you have the best intention in the world, and despite that you think that you do something nice or that you're doing something that is good, unconscious bias, because you're not aware of them, can have an impact on your attitude and create discriminatory actions, even if you were having the best intention. And we can take the school environment, for example. I think people that are going into the school system to work, especially the system that we have now, where we are asking teachers sometimes to even take from their own pocket money to buy materials, at least for Quebec. It's a situation that it's not the dream job. I think people that are going into the education system, it's because they want to have a positive impact in their society and they want to change things. But yet, although we have these people that are really full of good intention, when we look at disaggregated data, we still see that when we look at young people that are from equity-seeking groups, when it's time to refer them in terms of career, they are often directed towards professional career or sport programs, and not that much towards university programs. At a small level, you might think, oh, well, that's not such a big thing. There's some professional careers that are very interesting. There's some sport programs that are good, and it could give a good future to the kid. But when you look at the impact on the community itself, that means that in terms of community, our young people that are coming from equity-seeking groups are not at a university level. They're not into research. They're not into these high jobs that are really paying well based on your university studies. And whether you like it or not, it has an impact on the community.
And you're saying this, and I can see it in so many different ways. I know for my parents, it was really important that we go to university. It was to the point that if you're not going to university, we're going to have a conversation. So it was when they say conversation, it wasn't just let's talk about it. It's just like we're gonna hunt you down until you whatever program you
Yeah,
choose, you have to have a university degree. And again, that was in their mind, their ways of reverting. And as you say, there are some blue collar jobs that are well paid and that are totally interesting depending on your skill set, depending on your interest. But when you systematically refuse or close the doors on some opportunities because yeah, I don't think they would have money for university, or I don't think they would be interested, then yeah, you're limiting the potential of a larger group.
absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, like you said, it's not. I'm not looking down on
Mhm.
professional programs, but it's a question of like, yeah, at a greater level, if all our youths are not are directed away from university programs,
Mhm.
it will have an impact on the community as at large. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to use the other example because we might use it later on. But there's so many cliche and pockets on that.
Hmm.
So I'm going to ask you, how do we end up developing these biases? Where do they come from, and does everyone have them?
Everyone, if you're a human, you have biases.
Mhm.
Okay. Nobody can say, I don't have bias. Everybody have them. They are related to the way our brain is working. It's a
Mhm.
mechanism that our brain is using. So research shows that our brain receives a lot of information, and at the same time, and they have to process that information quickly sometimes. Okay. So because the brain has to process that information, the brain is creating shortcuts.
Mhm.
So the raccourci, they're creating shortcut. So instead of describing the information that we have in front of us, the brain skip the description step and go straight to interpretation.
Mhm.
It's a mechanism that allows us to do several things at the same time. And
Mhm.
in some cases, it even keeps us alive. Think
Mhm.
about when you're driving.
Yeah.
If literally when you were driving, you had to describe everything before you understand, oh, this is what it is, you can just imagine the number of accidents that will
Mhm.
happen. So when you come to an intersection, instead of right away going to the interpretation that there's a stop sign here, you'll be like, oh, there's something that is this shape and it's red, and on it it says stop, what,
So
so
now
that
you're hearing beep, 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 beep.
it's
It's
too
like,
late.
what's wrong with you, woman?
You already either stopping because your brain is still processing
Mhm.
and people are behind you like waiting, or you already in the intersection and you
Mhm.
skip that stop and you are involved in an accident. So because of that, our brain is like doing shortcuts. They like, oh, right away, I see that red thing. Even if I don't see what is reading on the red thing, I'm far away. Already my brain is like, it's a stop sign. Get ready. Start to put your foot on the brake for you to slow down when you arrive at the intersection. Okay. And the brain is doing these shortcuts based on association and generalizations. So they use a past experience
Mhm.
to do these interpretation that are skipping the description, and these past experience are related to our education, our
Mhm.
family, our friend, social classes. So you mentioned them at the beginning. There's so many things that are giving us information, and our brains is registering these information and doing these interpretation by skipping description. Mhm. So
I,
everybody has them.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you, and I'm thinking about some of the things we do as parents all the time. let's just say you have a child, you're afraid of dogs, and as soon as you see a dog, don't touch the dog, and then the child eventually gets a sense something's wrong with the dog. We don't touch dogs; they're dangerous.
Yes.
But it might just be the person is afraid of dogs, but it doesn't mean that all dogs are dangerous. So it's
Exactly.
those, as you say, association, and a lot of them, as you say, take place when we're young. We're receiving information, and we're not checking for validity. If whatever our parents say must be true, period,
Exactly.
because that's the age. I
Yeah.
take in, they're my dictionary, so that's where what I use to move forward.
And
So could
it's
you give?
exactly with the idea of like, don't do what I say, don't do what I do, but do what I say. But in reality, kids are doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I know here we kind of making a segue into another conversation, which is role modeling, but that's part of those unconscious bias because that's the way I've been informed all through life that things are meant to take place.
Yeah.
Then this is it. To me,
Yeah.
this reality is the reality for everyone. I don't assume that it's just me and my family, it's just everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll ask you another question in terms of can you give us some concrete example of what this implicit bias or unconscious bias might be in terms of let's just say let's go with age. What could be an implicit bias associated with age?
So um, we might think that um, somebody that is older will have problems with technology. So, for example, an older person goes to a public library, and we know that more as we are going, public libraries are more and more technology in order to find a book, in order to use books. And sometimes they don't even have the physical book in the library, it's only online. So you might find yourself in a situation where even before the person asks you, you are right away putting yourself, oh, an older person is coming. Okay, I'll have to, my next 30 minutes are going to be engaged in providing service. Not even so the person haven't asked you or anything, but just seeing them walking towards you and you are at the reception desk, right away your mind is kind of influencing the interaction that you're going to have. Okay. Or the person might be very comfortable with technology, so the person might be like, oh, I'm just checking something that is very normal, they don't need that much information. But unconscious bias can go to the way of you not even listening to what they're asking you and you providing more information, and they're just like, I just wanted to know if this book was back, because I reserved it last week on my when I was at home online, and I just come for to pick it up. But you, because you in your mind you saw them walking and they're older, you're like, oh, for sure they're not easy, they have problems with technology, so whatever they're going to ask, I'll have to give a lot of information, so you don't even hear what they're saying. Another one that I like to give as an example is people living with disability. So we have a tendency to make a connection between the physical disability they have and the capacity to do some professional work.
Mhm.
So, and sometimes the disability has nothing to do with their capacity to do the work. But us, because we see that person with a physical disability, we will question, oh, can we hire them? Oh,
Yeah.
could they do the work? And sometimes the work, I'm like, somebody that is in a wheelchair and that the work is talking with people. What's the link with them being able to talk, being able to present the work, versus them on a wheelchair? But unfortunately, our unconscious bias is usually questioning the capacity of these people because they have a physical or some kind of disability. Yeah.
And I like the example that you gave because it brought something to mind for me. I was on a plane and I can't remember where I was going or where I was coming from. It doesn't really matter. The flight attendant has asked for everybody to remove their earbuds. And there's two ladies that are speaking Spanish who didn't seem to have understood whatever. And then the flight attendant comes, and I noticed a lot of people do that. When somebody doesn't understand what you say, you speak louder and you speak slower. And it's just like, the problem is not that they're not hearing you. The problem is they don't speak the same language. So and those are those unconscious bias.
Yes.
And she didn't get it. She repeated at least 3 times before someone next to them just said, and
they
then we
removed
got it.
Exactly.
And smaller things. And as you said, it's not meant to sound demeaning to the other person, but sometimes the way it reflects leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth.
Exactly. Yeah. People that are at the receiving end of these unconscious bias, these things has real impact on their life.
Yeah.
These things have real impact on their life, in their daily interaction with people, and on their mind. One of the way unconscious bias is presenting, especially in the workplace, it's through microaggression. What is microaggression? It is something that is, you don't see it necessarily as harassment, but it's a comment that, for the person making the comment, they're under the impression they're making you a compliment sometimes.
Yes. I have one for you.
But when you look at the sentence or the comment that they make, you're like, oh, there's a second message under that. And I'm not so sure the second message is a compliment for me.
Yeah. I remember often, whether I was in university or when I started working, people would tell me, and they would slow down and tell me with a big smile, "You speak really good French." And I'm like, okay, how am I supposed to speak French? It is French. It's not, and I think the subliminal message was, for a Black person, you speak French really well. And then the slowing down means that I'm surprised you even understand as I'm talking to you. and yeah, a little microaggression. You smile, but at the same time you're like, okay, so you already decided I was not up to par in terms of language.
And also, I had a discussion regarding microaggression lately, and we were 3 racialized people in the group. And one person, so we were talking about the question of, where are you from? So you see, I think I don't even have to give more explanation. You right away understand. So we were 3 racialized people on the call, and the 2 others were like, well, for me, this is how I take it. I don't feel offended. I think the person wants to learn more about me. The second person was like, well, I don't feel offended, but I put it forward first. I'm from another country, or I'm not from another country, but I put it forward first, and then we start the conversation. And for me, as the last person, the last racialized person on the group, I said, me, I feel offended, especially if you ask me the question and my answer is Montreal, but you come back and say, oh, but where are your parents from? And for me, I was like saying, So when people were like, "Oh, that's a discussion," and I was like, "You see, it's fine that three people have three different experience.
Mhm.
This is taking us away from that idea that all groups are one person from one group is representing the needs for everybody in the
Yeah.
group." And that was the perfect example. I'm like, you
Mhm.
have three racialized people that are experiencing life differently, and it's a weight that we usually have as a
Mhm.
black person in a room. People will look at you as like the representation for all black people. No,
No.
you have a situation here where you can clearly see that although we are all Canadian and
Mhm.
black or from racialized group, we have different experiences. We have different needs. And I put it forward. I was like, so for me, I spend most of my life here. So when my parents moved to Canada, I was 6 months old. So for me, when I say Montreal is my home and you don't accept it as my answer, you are sending me the message that although I've been in this country for more than 40 years, I still not cannot claim this as my home, you know? And it's
And
very, very deep, and it's a message
it's
that
insidious.
at the end it has an impact on the mental health of
Yeah,
people.
because you're receiving the message that you're not really welcome here. It's okay if you're passing by, but not
Yeah.
if you're staying. My children were born in Canada.
Mm,
My parents are from Asian descent, but Paula was born in Europe.
mm,
So when people ask me, where are you from? Quebec City. No, really, where are you from? Are you asking me where I was born? And they're like, yeah. And I say, this country. And they're like, that's still not working because it's an all white country. I don't get you people. So, and your parents, and you know where they're going. But as
yes.
they're walking back into that conversation, I just wait and I just let it sit because I don't think they always realize what it is that they're doing, but at the same time, it's the clear message. So it's those subtle
Yeah.
messaging that gives you the sense that you're not where you're meant to be, which is in my mind, if you look like this, you should be in this type of country.
Exactly.
And just to make a point here, I remember being in the States
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of Afro descendants.
Mm-hmm.
And this person asked me because he thought I had a nice little accent, which was my accent from Quebec.
Yeah.
And he tells me, where are you from? And I tell them I'm from Canada. And he goes, oh, there's black people in Canada? And you're like, we're in 2015.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the part where sometimes that notion, and I'm sure that people, when you watch movies, when you look at the Oscars, where you look at all kinds of books and television, you know that in almost any country,
There's black people.
it's not just black people
There's
are traveling.
diversity.
There's
Yeah.
Asians, there's Mexicans, there's I don't know, Peruvians. They're all people.
There's
In fact, my
diversity.
children, I remember we used to have this difficult moment when we were younger, because when they would see an Asian people, they would call them Chinese.
Mm.
And I'm like, no, unless they tell you they're from China, you go with their larger origin group, which is Asians. Until you know for sure, you don't just assign a label to someone when they haven't asked for it.
And I'm even wondering. So this makes me think. I've been having reflection. So when you connect with someone or you just meet someone, is it really pointing out the differences between you and them, that is the way of connecting with someone. So one of my friend is like saying that him, instead of when he meets somebody new, instead of asking question like where you from, he usually asks like what is your story, and open the door for the person to decide what they want to
Conversation.
put forward. Having a conversation on really connecting on example of things that we have as similar, rather than trying to figure out what is different. And so I think there's a whole conversation, a whole reflection that we need to do around that. But most of all, I think everybody's different.
Yeah.
Stop thinking for granted that people wants to be treated like you are treated. People wants to be treated like they want to be treated.
That's it.
Yeah.
And this is the part where when we're looking at stereotypes, at least for me, I'm always trying to challenge myself. Let's
Mm,
just say you see a woman on a court and she's playing basketball.
mm,
His first question is like, "Oh, why is she playing basketball?"
mm.
And then it's just like, "Why not?
Exactly.
Why is she playing soccer? Why not?
Yeah.
Maybe she doesn't like dancing the same way maybe some men enjoy dancing. And there's nothing wrong in that. And it's just realizing that sometimes we have grown in an era, in an environment where we have those very clear, delineated, I would say, highways where people are meant to operate. And then when you notice someone is out of that or out of their lane, you're like, what's wrong with you? And that's the part where, what should it be wrong?
Yeah.
Good. You stepped further than what they expected from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in terms of gender, unconscious bias is crazy on that. Gender roles, like what women are supposed to do and what men are
Mhm.
supposed to be. Um, when I talk about unconscious bias, one of the exercise that we do is like, what are the expressions that we have in our society that is reflecting our unconscious bias? And people usually have tons of them.
Mhm.
Things like men are not supposed to cry, don't run like a girl. So these are all things that are a reflection of the unconscious bias that society is putting on us in terms of gender roles.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think we could go
Oh
on
yeah.
and on about so many different examples because
Yeah.
as we're looking at those different items we've mentioned, whether it's social status, whether it's economic status, whether it's the car you drive,
Yeah.
there's messaging that goes with it, but that have nothing to do with the actual car, individual, or behavior that you're trying to pass on to that other person.
Yeah.
So when one realizes that they hold those biases, how does one go about getting rid of these or reframing them?
Mhm. The first thing that you have to do is to be aware, because they are in your unconscious, you are not aware of them. So
Mhm.
people have to realize, as a human, I have biases.
Mhm.
So now you have to check yourself on a regular basis on what are these biases that I have. And there's so many ways you can mitigate them. But one of them definitely is seeing people as individual, rather than focusing on stereotypes or generalization. Spend time connecting on a more personal level with people. Another way is to work consciously to change your stereotypes. So you know that you might have some preconceived notions towards older people. Spend time with older people. Spend time with them in order to deconstruct, like to break these things that you are thinking and realizing, and basing your decision on facts towards these people instead of these preconception that you have. Take the time to pause and reflect. I think one of the biggest uh, challenge in terms of fighting with your unconscious bias, it's time. We live in a society where time is money. So decisions have to be quick. We want information now. So the more quicker you take a decision, the more it's probably your unconscious bias that is playing rather than your rational, rather than facts.
Mhm.
The quicker the answer or the quicker something comes to your mind without you doing no effort, the more it's probably your unconscious bias. So taking time to pause
Mhm.
and reflect on that assumption that you're making right now
Mhm.
and say, okay, I just made that assumption. It's based on what? And you take the time to think, and you will realize that, oh, it's just based on past experience or something that I heard or something that my family used to say, and it's not based on reality. you know um, Increase your exposure to
Different
different
groups,
people.
different
Yes,
realities.
different realities, different group. I was talking about one of the things that I define myself is empathy. I try to put myself in the other person's shoes. So this is something that we need to do more, to try to understand people and stop like basing our decision on pre assumption that we have. Definitely.
And I hear you. And I remember when I was working in the corporate environment, every time somebody would tell me, we can't do that,
Mm,
usually in my mind is the first question that would come is, why not?
exactly.
And then when you explore the why not, oftentimes you find out that there's no real rule telling you you can't. It's more like we've never done that and not sure how we should go about doing that. But that's not a we can't.
Yeah.
And those are the things where and I guess, sorry, I was one of those kids that the parents had challenges with because I was always asking the why.
Why?
And then I have a grandchild who is, oh my God, she is a why kind of child too. And and I see myself still being stretched by
Yeah.
that 2 or 3 year old, because there are things as a parent you're thinking, oh no, you can't do, and it's like, okay, let's rephrase that. Vaut mieux, no, let's not do this because that could be dangerous. Or you have to give her a reason, because if you don't give
Yeah.
her a reason, she's not gonna stop doing this. And you realize there's things that my mind was very much aware of when I was raising my children.
Mhm.
And then as they grow into adults, I kind of forgot certain things. And
Mm.
also then the child comes and they're like poking you, and you're like, oh, I thought I was a little more open than I thought. And as you say, it's time.
Yeah.
It's time, and it is about awareness.
Yeah.
Once you realize, then you check in it. For me, and I remember for years I wanted to have gray hair.
Mm.
So I'm very happy with my gray hair, except that I don't like when people think I'm old, because they look at you as, let's just say, if when I was young and I was wearing those 6-inch heels and somebody was trying to help me out of the car, that was sexy. Now
Uh-huh.
that I have gray hair and you're trying to help me, it feels like, what? You think I can't?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You questioning, and it worked both ways. Like somebody was giving me an example, still in a discussion around bias, where um, They take their car to the garage. It's a woman. She takes her car to the garage. She says, even before she enters the garage, she like puts in her mind that they're going to be gender biased and they're going to try to force me into doing things that I don't need on my car because they're going to think that I don't I don't understand the
Mhm.
mechanic of the car. So she said that had an impact in even before she started the interaction with the person, she was already on the defensive.
On guard.
And I'm not saying that it's not a bias that doesn't exist. It is
Mhm.
true that there's a conception, and it's still connected to gender roles, that there's a presumption that women are less knowledgeable in terms of cars.
Mhm.
But because her mind, even before she gets in, is already here, if the person that is serving her is very genuine and saying, "Okay, you tell me to check your all, I'm just checking your all," the the interaction even before it starts is already kind of like in the defensive mode, and it could quickly go, and you'll just like at the end you end up in a discussion, and at the end of the discussion you're just like, wow, that was just for all change, you
Mhm.
know because you came into that conversation or that interaction
Mhm.
with your own bias.
You came in with your own bias, but also your own narrative of how that bias was gonna. So you're kind
Play.
of trying to make someone else fit into your narrative, and it's just like I don't even know what narrative you're using. So how could I get into your conversation?
Yeah, so we need to take time and pause and make sure that we connect on an individual level. Interaction with people should be based on the interaction that you have with that person,
Mhm.
not based on presumption of past experience.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And as you say, every now and then I say something or I do something, and it's barely out of my mouth, and you're like, "Oh, come back in, come back." And usually in those moments, for those of you to whom it happens, it's those moments where you're like, oh, maybe that was an unconscious bias. I am projecting what has nothing to do with this situation. So,
So they say that we have two ways of thinking: rational thinking and intuitive thinking. The intuitive thinking is connected to emotion. It's fast, it's quick. You don't have to do any effort. It's right away, there's something that comes to your mind. And this is where unconscious bias is playing. The rational thinking, it's something that you have to do an effort before taking
mhm,
your decision. Your decision is going to be based on facts. So somebody's putting something in front of you, and right away you're like, okay, I have to do my pros and cons. So the
that's me
fact
with
that
cars.
so the fact that you're like saying, "Oh, I have to do my pros and cons," right away you're like, "Oh, okay, this is more rational. I'm taking time to think about that situation that I have in front of me. I'm taking time to reflect and take a good decision based on these reflection." But if you come, they give you the thing, and before you know it, you're like, "No," or "Yes." You have to think that that decision, that no or that
Mhm.
yes, that came so quickly, it's probably based on some emotions,
Yeah.
and emotions are what unconscious bias is playing on.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You're saying this, and I'm thinking about a conversation I had recently with one of my daughter. I came home with plants, and then she goes, "And you had to buy more plants." And, and as she said that, I find myself thinking, but it was my decision was totally emotional. I didn't need plants. I wanted plants. So that's those are the things where even if it's something that makes you feel good, you also have to understand that it's what's driving
Yeah,
that feeling that creates the
yeah,
potential challenge.
and especially when the decision has an impact on somebody. You know, I'm like the example that you're giving is innocent because it's your house, it's your plant, and it's, you
And
know,
my
it's
money too.
exactly, it's yours. So you have the right to treat yourself. You know, I might not need to buy the plant, but I want to. So I'm buying them. But when the decision that you're making or the interaction that you're taking, that you're making, has an impact on the other person,
Yeah.
uh, where we're talking about microaggression, where the person is like feeling like, that comment, I don't know if it was really a compliment, you know? Oh, that comment that they're making, they're sending me a second message, and I'm kind of questioning myself. You know, women that are working in sciences, they have situation where constantly people will review their work.
More intensely.
Exactly. So at a point, that person is going to come to a point where she's going to, that woman is going to automatically question the work.
Am I doing a good job or not?
Yeah, because systemically she realized that they are
Mhm.
reviewing her work more than they are reviewing the work of her male colleagues in the same work as her. So at some point, it has an impact on the people physically or even mentally. And it's not because we cannot see it that it's not
Not there.
making a really big impact on these
Mhm.
people. Yeah.
Um, I remember at one point there was, and again, this is where we call those unconscious bias. There were those people that were trying to hire people,
Mhm.
hiring process. And you know this thing in certain culture where we don't look at people in the eyes because it's a lack of respect in certain
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
In North America, if you're not looking at someone, it
It's a lack of respect.
lack of respect or you're hiding something.
You're lying. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. So this is the part where you have to know the two. And I remember being with my colleagues, and when one of them made the comment about this person, don't trust them because, and you're like, okay, need
Ah,
to have we need to take a moment and
yes.
unpack this
Hmm.
information and
Exactly.
realize that from different cultural backgrounds there's a different messaging, and if you're not aware, and that's why to me diversity and inclusions are huge in that. The more diversity we have, the more we realize that there's a lot more similarity than there are
Yeah.
differences.
Exactly.
But if we always think that everybody is meant to look like me, think like me, and do like me, chances are you have some unconscious bias.
Yeah. And we have to realize people, we're comfortable with people that look like us.
Yeah.
You know, it's less effort. You know, we understand what they're saying because they are like us. You know, and that doesn't mean that they are better.
No. But
That
that
doesn't.
also doesn't mean that you can't be stretched, because some people that are like you all the time, after a while, you get bored. And then you find you move, whether it's a new food or whether it's a new environment, and things you used to take for granted all of a sudden take a different value.
Yeah.
And that's the part where uh, differences don't all have to be negative.
Mm.
And that's the part that sometimes we assume that if it's not like it has always been, then there's a problem.
So true. Different. The fact that something is different doesn't mean it's bad.
No,
What doesn't mean it's less, doesn't mean it's better. It just means it's different.
different.
Yeah.
I'm a cat person. I have a friend who's a no, I'm a dog person. I have a
Uh-huh.
friend who's a cat person. For me, I don't even understand cats, period. And on the other side, some people would say you think you handle your dog a bit like you're handling a child.
Mm.
And it's just like, okay, need to, maybe I have some boundary issues with this that I have to address. We're not gonna go there.
Mm.
thinking about boundaries, I'm
Yeah.
going to switch the topic a little.
Uh-huh.
For me, boundaries are something that allows most of us
Mm-hmm.
to be better aligned with what we want in life and in terms of what we want for ourselves. So I will ask you, what boundaries? Because you've traveled and you're
Yeah.
working on unconscious bias. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of potential derailment.
Yeah.
What boundaries have you put in place in your personal or professional life that has created the most growth for you?
Um, Definitely learning. I'm the type of person that thinks you never stop to learning. Um, my family, that's the image they showed me. My dad undertook doing his master's degree in theology when he was close to 70 years old, and he started his master's degree. My mom, although she had 5 kids, did all her studies
Mhm.
from elementary school all the way to CJEP. So for me, it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter your reality, your circumstances. There's always the opportunity to learn. So this is something that I always read things, always listen to
Mhm.
thing. So a lot of my colleagues that will come with asking me question, and my answer usually with them is like, "Oh, I just saw something regarding that. Oh, I just read something."
Mhm.
So learning is a way for me to grow.
Yeah.
And another boundary is my family. I
Mhm.
think although I travel the world, I know that my family has my back. I used to, for the last years at my birthday, I don't, I don't take it as for them to say happy birthday. I'm sending them a message saying thank you for accepting all my craziness.
I love it. I love
And
it.
sending them a message. And I think one year I was tired and I sent my message later. And one of my sisters said, "How come we haven't received your message?" Because
Like you're no longer happy with us.
I'm telling you, I'm waking up. I usually think about that message the day before. I select a picture, either flowers or a beautiful picture of me, and saying, "You receive a gift that day, and thank you. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for, it doesn't matter how crazy my projects are. I know you have my back."
I love it. I love it. And I also come from a family of continuous learner.
Yeah,
And if you were to remove books from my life or opportunities to
to learn.
explore new
Yeah.
hobbies, it's just like, what? What? What's the point?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And this is the part you'll have to figure out. How do you make room for those things that allow your soul to replenish? That was a good moment. I love that word.
I
So,
love it too. Thank you for the opportunity.
my pleasure. Before we finish, I'm gonna ask you a last question.
Yes.
If you had to leave a key message with the audience today, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to question yourself and to question your belief. It might be, I think you mentioned it at the beginning, that some conversation might be uncomfortable. But in that discomfort, there's learning. you know that area of discomfort, it's a learning, and we need to seize these opportunities. Uncomfortable or discomfort doesn't mean necessarily bad.
And sometimes we have to remember that the brain's job is to protect us. And the way it does it is by giving you that scripted messaging that you're meant to follow so
Yeah.
that you don't have to wander in and out. So they
Mhm.
know you come home safe. but we're no longer fighting for our life. So that part of our brain, we need to stretch, get step out of our comfort zone at least regularly, at least
Yeah.
once a week, if not more, so
Mhm.
that you keep your brain, your how could I say, your muscle alive
Yeah.
and stimulated.
Yeah. Check yourself. So one of the example in terms of managing your unconscious bias is the image of comparing unconscious bias by taking the garbage bag out of your house. So if you are cleaning your house and you just take your garbage bag once a year, you quickly going to have serious problem in your house. So it's the same thing for unconscious bias. It's a constant work, and it's something that you have to check yourself constantly and make the
Make
cleaning.
they clear the
Yeah,
hole to make room for the new.
exactly.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for coming back and having this conversation with us. It was another very uplifting conversation for me, and I'm hoping it does the same for our listeners. So thank you again.
It was my pleasure.